some words of Torah for Parshat Lech Lecha. What makes for a Yiddish cup, a Jewish way of thinking? I'd argue that one definition of thinking like a Jew is to believe that justice will always prevail in the long run, even though it doesn't always prevail in the short run. This is epitomized by the statement of faith by Maimonides, the 12th Ani Mamin. Ani Mamin be'emunah shalema, I believe with complete faith, b'viat HaMashiach, in the coming of the Messiah. Ve'afal pi sheyit mamea, even though he may tarry, im kol ze achakelo b'chol yom sheyavo, I will anticipate daily his coming. This phrase has been sung by Jews while marching to the crematoria. It affirms the Jewish belief that while things may be terrible now, I believe that in the end, God's justice and goodness will prevail. Perhaps this is one way of understanding the debate between two biblical characters in our Parsha, Avraham and Malki-Tzedek, whose name was originally Shem, the son of Noah. The Medrash relates that Shem, Noah's son, eventually became a great ruler and would change his name to Malki-Tzedek. After Avraham succeeded in defeating the four kings who had terrorized various city-states in the area, Malki-Tzedek brought out bread and wine as gifts to Avraham and gave him a blessing. Avraham in turn gave Malki-Tzedek a tithe of his assets. The Medrash records that the two differed in what name they would call the very same city that they both held so dear. King Malki-Tzedek called that city Shalem, meaning whole or complete. But Avraham, who had the Akedah experience overlooking that very same city, called the place Hashem Yireh, as recorded in the Akedah story that we'll read next week. God will see. Hashem, according to the Medrash, argued as follows: if I call the city Yireh, the name given to it by Avraham, Shem will have a grievance against me. But if I call the city Shalem, the name given to it by Shem, Avraham will have a grievance against me. I will therefore call it by both names, a contraction of Yireh and Shalem, to get the name Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. Why is this naming dispute relevant in the Medrash? And why did Hashem feel that he had to acquiesce to each one's name? Rav Mordechai Leiner's Beis Yaakov provides insight. Consider, if Avraham had lost the war, if good had not triumphed over evil, how would Malki-Tzedek have reacted? He only came out with all the pageantry to bless Avraham because Avraham was the victor. Malki-Tzedek devoted his life to the belief that the world is great because God created it. Everything is amazing, and we can find God and goodness everywhere. All we need to do is open our eyes to see his perfection and presence. But had Avraham lost, Malki-Tzedek would have viewed the events as one big Chilul Hashem. He would have ignored Avraham and covered the whole thing up as if it never happened. Now, it truly is an amazing level of spirituality to find God in everything, but it doesn't always work, unfortunately. The good guys don't always win. We can't always expect a Hollywood ending where good triumphs over evil and where God is readily apparent. Still, Malki-Tzedek wanted to bring mankind's attention only to the beauty of creation. He therefore called his city Shalem. All is good, all is complete, all is perfect, and nothing is missing or ugly. One example of where the perfection of this world was not apparent was during the time of the Akedah, where Hashem instructed Avraham to offer his beloved son as a human sacrifice. The event was further muddied by God staying Avraham's hand at the last minute, thus demonstrating some kind of contradiction within God himself, or to the onlooker, some moral failing on Avraham's part, who had embarked on a spiritual mission but failed to pull it off in the end. At the end of the Akedah, Avraham called that place Hashem Yireh. God will see in the future. His message was different from Malki-Tzedek's. We don't always get to see the happy ending. Sometimes only God sees that. At the same time that we're seeing failure, darkness, and imperfection, we nonetheless express confidence that in the future, if we wait long enough, if we have the patience and panoramic view of the Creator himself, eventually the good will emerge. Hashem Yireh. God will see in the end. This is the tension between the more simplistic worldview of Melchizedek and the more complex worldview that is perforce necessary for the Jew embodied in Avram. For Melchizedek, everything is self apparently great. Anything that goes wrong will just sweep it under the rug. For Avraham, however, that perspective simply doesn't work. Better to resign ourselves to the fact that we don't always get to see the goodness within the story, but we express confidence that if we don't see it, Hashem will see it in the end. The Arizal says that many of the generations that came before the Jews were later reincarnated into the Jewish people. For example, he says that the people who built the Tower of Babel were reincarnated as the original Jews who left Egypt. The people of the tower sinned with mortar and bricks, and their rectification, their tikkun, took place by being slaves and being forced to build structures for the Egyptians with the same mortar and bricks. The message is that through the power of the Jewish people and our positive thinking, we are able to take situations which are bad and convert them and refine them into something good. Avraham succeeded in doing this, and that is why Hashem blessed him with "V'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama." Now, we normally translate that verse as stating that all the families of the world will be blessed through you, that famous passage in Genesis chapter 12. But the word "v'nivrechu" can also be translated to read, all families of the world will be grafted to you, just like you graft a branch onto a tree, which is lahavrich in Hebrew. And Avraham is what the verse is stating. You will have that power through your optimistic outlook to take anything negative, any negative force or experience, and refine it into something positive by attaching it to yourself. You, Avraham, will be able to take the negative elements of the people who built the tower and graft it onto your positivity. Instead of utilizing their unity to rebel against God, that very same unity was utilized when the Jews stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah, ki ish echad b'lev echad, as one man with one heart. The world has been trying for centuries to knock God out of us and to make us lose hope. They tried by destroying our two temples, and they couldn't succeed. They tried by killing 6 million of us, and they couldn't succeed. As Elie Wiesel said in one of his short stories, From the Gates of the Forest, depicting a father speaking to his son, Gabriel, he said, God's final victory, my son, lies in man's inability to reject him. We have taken the tragic events of October 7th and converted them into an energizing force for the Jewish people to reunify and recommit to our people and our land. As much as Melchizedek represented righteousness and the desire to find God in the world, his model was unsustainable in the face of death and suffering throughout history. That is why we don't hear of the lasting power of Melchizedek's ideology, as righteous as he was. Our attitude that good will prevail, but only in the long run, has been our sustaining nutrient for all these millennia. We can all envision that eventual victory today more than ever before. As Jews, we always see points of light, like the bright stars shining in a dark sky. That is exactly what Hashem showed Avraham in the prophecy about how his descendants would be. Today, those stars are shining more brightly than ever before. There is so much to be thankful for, and there is so much reason to be optimistic for the future. Despite all the darkness and despite all of the pain over this past year, we can still see those points of light getting larger and larger. And so, dear friends, let's live our lives with our heads held high, so that eventually we will see the lights of the sky blotting out all the darkness in the world. May we see it, dear friends. Bimhei Rabbi, Amenu, Amen. Here's wishing you a beautiful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.